Ferrari is the most successful team in Formula One history. They've achieved 16 Constructors' Championships in their history, and that's 7 more than any other competitor. The Italian team are the only setup to have competed in every single Grand Prix, and yet, in their current form, they seem incapable of producing and developing a car that's capable of competing for a World Championship. So what's gone wrong for the strongest F1 team in history? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Ferrari's fall from the top. You have to go back 15 years to find the last time that Ferrari ended the season as champions. In 2008, the team won the Constructors' Championship, building on the close Drivers' Championship that they won in 2007. This period of time was strong for the team. They were still achieving success in the post-Michael Schumacher era, and the team setup going into 2008 was beginning to transition away from the likes of Ross Brawn and John Todd, and moving towards a new era where Stefano Domenicali became the team principal. These changes brought an end to one of the most dominant eras in the history of Formula One. Ferrari had bought Michael Schumacher to the team in 1996, and soon after, Ross Brawn followed the German driver to become the team's technical director. This then brought 6 consecutive Constructors' Championships between 1999 and 2004, in addition to 5 of Michael Schumacher's Drivers' Championships between 2000 and 2004. This level of dominance had never been seen before. The previous record for consecutive Constructors' titles was held by McLaren, as they'd won 4 between 1988 and 1991. What was happening in the late 2000s, though, was the beginning of a transition away from this incredibly strong leadership team. Come 2009, the aerodynamic regulations changed, with the cars being considerably simplified with fewer wings and offshoots permitted. Similarly, the rear wings were narrower and taller, with the hopes that these changes would reduce the wake of cars, potentially allowing for cars to race closer together. Reading back on the 2009 regulations, it's fascinating to see how the intentions of the rules and the media narrative around them is just so similar to the changes that were made in 2022. Ferrari's performance in this new era was poor. The team dropped back to 4th in the Constructors' standings, which was their worst performance since 1993. The team were impacted by the technical regulation changes, but also the ban on in-season testing, which was a change that was introduced in efforts to reduce the cost for the teams. This meant that they would be unable to take advantage of the circuit that they have on site, which they'd use regularly throughout their dominant era. In addition, the team had spent lots of their time and resources on their 2008 championship fight, with Felipe Massa being incredibly close to winning the title that season. The team did achieve the Constructors' title, but the cost of this effort was the fact that they ended up spending less time on developing their challenger for 2009, which impacted their ability to hit the ground running in the new era. Throughout the 2010s, Ferrari's position was regularly in the top 3 in the Constructors' Championship. They won races most years, but ultimately they were always behind the likes of Red Bull and Mercedes. The introduction of the turbo-hybrid engines in 2014 saw the team struggle to produce a power unit that could compete, and this season saw the team fall to 4th in the Constructors' Championship once again, another sign that the team had failed to spend enough time developing their new power unit despite not even challenging for the championship in 2030. This failure to utilise the new engine regulations to propel the Italian team back up the order was a sign of some of the other issues facing the Ferrari setup, which was happening in the leadership team. But before we look into this turbulent history, I want to take a moment to ask you to subscribe to Behind the Drive. More than 50% of you watching right now aren't yet subscribed to the channel, so if you haven't already, it would be brilliant if you could hit that subscribe button. The turbulent leadership changes. The changes for 2008 included the introduction of Stefano Domenicali as team principal, an Italian leader, and this trend continued throughout the 2010s and into the 2020s as the team opted to appoint Italian team principals. This decision was made with the idea of Ferrari being a family, a narrative that Mattia Binotto would then go on to use during his tenure. This trend of picking Italian leaders was criticised heavily during this time by various former drivers and in the media. It's easy to critique a team when they aren't performing to the levels that are expected of them, but there wasn't much diversity when it came to the top positions at the team from a nationality perspective, and this fundamentally means the team would be more likely to suffer from groupthink, which is a phenomena that means the team would find themselves supporting perspectives that lead the team down the wrong development path. This is something that may have been part of the issue with the Ferrari team, but it wasn't the only challenge that the team faced. When you look at the timeline of Ferrari team principals over the last 30 years, you start to see an interesting pattern. When Jean Todt became team principal in 1993, he took over a very tricky role. The team had failed to achieve a Constructors' Championship in 10 years, and the role was not an easy one to step into. But despite this challenge and the success he is well known for in the Italian team, it actually took Todt 6 years before he achieved a title with the team. It took this amount of time as he spent several years building the right team around him to achieve the success. He brought Schumacher into the fold in 1996 and then Ross Brawn a year later. This resulted in a huge run of form in the early 2000s, which was unprecedented. The important point at this stage is the fact that Todt was given lots of time to make changes, and when you think about the level of organisational changes required to create a successful Formula 1 team and the personnel changes required as well, this will take a long time. The beginning of the end of the Todt era as team principal started in 2004, as he took up the CEO role in addition to his team lead position. This began a series of events which led to him preparing Stefano Domenicali to take over his role from 2008 onwards. This period of time coincided with the team's driver lineup changing, with Schumacher retiring, and the end of the consistent success as Renault won the World Championships in 2005 and 2006. Domenicali's tenure began with some success, as I discussed earlier. The team was still a driving force in Formula 1, but with the regulation changes on the horizon, the challenges were yet to come. Despite these challenges, Domenicali was given a long period of time to take the team back to success, and he almost achieved championships. With Alonso at the team, Ferrari was so close to winning the title, despite rarely having the fastest car. 2012 is one of the years that the team was so close to success, and that is predominantly down to the appointment of that driver. Domenicali held the team principal role until 2014, the year where the power unit regulations changed, and it was clear that Ferrari had failed to bridge the gap to the top teams in the sport. And in fact, they'd actually dropped back, and it took just 3 races for Domenicali to resign from his position. At this point, the situation was clear. Domenicali was given 6 or 7 years to achieve success as the leader of Ferrari. He did win the title in 2008, but the team had still failed to win the driver's title with Felipe Massa, which was their ultimate goal that year. He'd had some seasons where he could have achieved some success, but ultimately they were unsuccessful, and they were unable to get the titles that they so desperately craved. There was another change needed at the top after his resignation, and the role was filled by Marco Mattiacci, an internal appointment. It was a difficult role to fill, given the team needed to find a way to achieve success when their power unit and car were a step behind the others. The Ferrari chairman at the time, Sergio Marchionne, recognised this challenge. He understood that coming into this role when the regulations had just changed would make it even more difficult for Mattiacci, but while all the previous team principals since 1993 had been given the time to build the team around them, Mattiacci was not. During his short tenure through the rest of the 2014 season, he signed Sebastian Vettel to the team, replacing Alonso, and he moved some technical personnel that he didn't feel were good enough for the role. And then he also gave his full support to key personnel such as James Allison. But despite all this, he was still dropped, and this decision shocked the Formula 1 world. Marchionne appointed Mauricio Arrivabene at the end of the season, which was reportedly a tactical move to go towards the team principal, who had a better relationship with the chief executive of Formula 1, Bernie Ecclestone. This change would potentially give Ferrari more influence in the sport, and in turn give them a better chance to progress up the order. Now, of course, this might not have been the exact reason for the change, but the move gave the Ferrari chairman more confidence that they had a strong leader in Arrivabene. So with the 2014 turbulence behind them, and Ferrari well behind in the order, it was expected that a new year with a new driver lineup and a new team principal would represent the beginning of a recovery for the team and a journey back to the front. This would be the case as the team got back to winning ways in just the second race of the 2015 season, and overall they returned to second in the Constructors' Championship. The team then plateaued, with Ferrari being consistently behind Mercedes. The gap to the top team in Formula 1 was a tough one to bridge, and come 2019, the almost revolving door of the Ferrari team principal office revolved once again, with the chief technical officer Mattia Binotto taking charge. This change was another that demonstrated how the team itself wasn't really that stable. Formula 1 team principals don't tend to be changed as frequently as football managers. They tend to be given time to build their teams over several years. But the change in leadership structure by bringing Binotto to the top was another interesting decision. Binotto's position as technical director wasn't replaced. All the technical teams continued to report into the new team boss. This meant that there was a lot more responsibility on Binotto's shoulders. He would be in charge of the team's development heading into the new regulations, which at the time were scheduled for 2021. Ferrari's performance from 2019 to 2021 was turbulent once again. A strong 2019 season in which they brought Charles Leclerc into the fold was soured by the fact that their power unit was in breach of the regulations, something that was revealed by the technical directive issued at the US Grand Prix. This then resulted in the team's worst performance in 40 years in 2020, as Ferrari dropped back to 6th in the constructors' standings. This wasn't something that resulted in Binotto being dropped, but instead he was supported to develop the car for the new regulations which were now scheduled for 2022. The revolving door of Ferrari's team principal office has been turbulent for the team. Frequent changes to the leaders and the teams around them are not what you would expect from the top teams in the sport. If you look at Red Bull, for example, they have the longest standing team principal on the grid in Christian Horner, and he was given the time to get Red Bull back to the top after their bad run in the beginning of the turbo hybrid era. But the stability paid off, with the team now the strongest in the sport once again. This instability at Ferrari was concerning, but moving into 2022 there were signs that the Italian team were in the best place to rise back to the top. The signs of revival. The 2022 season was a new era for Formula One. New regulations tend to result in changes in the championship order, and with the new financial regulations and testing time rules in place, there was more opportunity for change. The regulations themselves were designed with racing in mind, as the cars were designed to reduce weight to the following car and make overtaking more likely. Ferrari's position was very strong. There was a short period of time in 2019 where the new regulations were revealed and there were no financial limits in place. It's likely that Ferrari would have had the budget and resources to dedicate some time to the new regulations at this early stage, giving them an initial advantage over the rest of the field. When the development for the new cars was opened up in 2021, the team were well behind the top two in Red Bull and Mercedes. And with those two competing for the top spot in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship that year, there was a chance that they would spend more of their budget on the 2021 season rather than looking forward to 2022. By the time the cars were revealed in 2022, there was a huge discrepancy between the designs of the cars on the grid. Ferrari's setup had huge side pods with deep bathtub-like bowls in the side, while Mercedes had gone in the opposite direction. At the first race in Bahrain, the team then achieved their ultimate goal, taking a 1-2 finish for the first time since 2019. It looked like the team had produced a car that might well be capable of winning the World Championship, and it was a huge achievement for them to be back at the front. At this early stage of the season, it was clear Ferrari had a strong car, but it didn't take long before errors and mistakes started to reveal themselves. The team made many strategic errors through the season, and their development was also slower than their main rivals, Red Bull. By the end of the year, a combination of these factors meant that they were a distant second in both the World Championships, and arguably at the end of the season they were more concerned with the Mercedes team behind them than Red Bull ahead. The end of the season was therefore a bit disappointing. Ferrari were in a stronger position compared to where they'd been previously, but at the same time they were also not winning the World Championships that they'd hoped for. It has now been more than a decade since the team last won a World Championship, and this was enough for Mattia Binotto, who promptly left the team as he didn't have the support of the leadership. Once again, the team had dropped their team principal, and not given him the support to rebuild the team. The strategic errors were rightly criticised by other teams and in the media, but it could be argued that Binotto could have been given more time. The future. Ferrari's new team principal, Fred Vasseur, is their first external hire in this position since Jean Todt. Vasseur is the fourth non-Italian team principal of the team, and this is perhaps a sign that they're heading in a different direction. A new leadership team and chairman of the brand has made their mark on the F1 team. This is potentially a good sign. If Vasseur is given the time to introduce changes to the team and solve the strategic issues and rebuild the team itself. The early signs from 2023 though have been disappointing. The team are currently fourth in the championship and have faced some reliability related issues already. Similarly, there have been signs of the team's strategic mistakes already, and Charles Leclerc has expressed this frustration on the team radio. Right now, Carlos Sainz is 5th in the driver's standings and Leclerc is 10th. The team has one of the strongest driver lineups on the grid, and yet they're failing to deliver them a car or a team that is capable of winning the championship. This is meant to be a team that's capable of winning championships every single season, but they are well behind so far this year. In Fred Vasseur, the team now have an experienced and capable leader, but the big question is about whether he'll be given the time to rebuild the team. To end up in this position after starting so well 12 months ago is definitely disappointing, so it'll be interesting to see what happens next as they return to square one.